every person has a secret skill, a superpower, as I call it. And I think the genesis comes from having the confidence that that is what your superpower is.
How do you know that?
How do you know that?
Like, how did you, when you were 33, if you take a, was it 33? How old were you?
33 to 35.
33, 35. When you were in that space, how did you know that?
Things got easy. Things
so
got
you
easy.
changed.
I changed.
And then it flowed.
And then it flowed. I ended being the guy in the center of it all and became number 2 for somebody else. And once I became 2 to somebody else's number 1, became that Batman or the Robin to that Batman or the Scottie Pippen to the Michael, or whatever you want to call it, things got easy for me. It's like, this is easy. And then the money started to flow. And then revenue started to come in.
I'm Art Blanchford, and this is Life in Transition. Welcome back to this episode of the Life in Transition podcast. I'm really excited to have another face-to-face guest, Jason Weiss, who is a new friend of mine and really excited to be with. He's a 26-year attorney and the founder of the Symphony group of companies, which does advising in all kinds of different capacities. He's also an avid marathoner, just ran the New York Marathon, sub 4 hours on his 50th birthday on November 3rd. Wannabe triathlete and a long-term husband and father of 3 young children. So Jason, it's really been great to get to know you the last year, and welcome so much to Life in Transition podcast.
Are so happy to be here. Yeah, it's been great getting to know you. Look forward to diving in.
So jumping in, what would you consider, Jason, to be your most impactful transition in your life? Most meaningful, most impactful transition that you have been through?
Yeah, looking back, the most impactful transition was internally for me. It was, am I going to be worried about what other people think I'm doing, or what other people perceive me as, or what other people think of my title, or what I'm really good at? Am I going to lean into what I'm good at, or what I want a title to be about me?
That really hit me when you said that when we were having our discovery call, because so many people never figure that out, and they spend their whole life trying to live up to other people's expectations or to what they, their title or I call it building a monument to themselves. Or maybe it's even to other people instead of letting life unfold, right? And the way you had said it before, because I wrote it down, it says from who I look like I am to who I really am.
That's right.
Which I thought was beautiful.
I can still remember the inflection point to that. I was an attorney. I was a young attorney, and I loved going into Nordstrom's and them asking me, what do you do? And it dawned on me as I left there, the only person that I'm going to embarrass or be worried about is the Nordstrom salesperson.
Right.
No, I love Nordstrom's, and shout out to Nordstrom if they're a client or a sponsor. But I will say this, is once you stop worrying about what the salesperson asks you, what do you do, and lean into what you do best, you're going to be so much better off.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that's so true. And I wonder, when did you realize that, Jason? When did you have that recognition that it's okay? First of all, who are you really? What is your gift? What did God give you to do? And that it's okay to lean into that instead of trying to be something you thought you were supposed to be. When did you have that recognition?
So I used to be a big basketball fan. And I remember watching in the 90s, the Chicago Bulls. Great team. And they had Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. And there was a year Michael Jordan didn't play basketball. And Scottie Pippen was asked to be the Michael Jordan of the team and to lead the team. And he essentially failed miserably in that role.
Yeah.
And I was looking at my life in my early 30s. I was an attorney. I finished at the top of my class in law school. I had the resume of I was going to be the president of this large company. I was going to be the leader, the founder. I was going to be that person.
Was that like an industrial company or of a law firm?
Just in general.
Didn't matter.
I thought I was going to be
that's the path you were on. You were going to be president and CEO of some significant company.
I was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I realized, no, Jason, you're the Scottie Pippen for other people's Michael Jordan. You are going to be the one that's going to lift those people to be at those levels. You're going to be the one. And it wasn't until I humbled what I thought my journey was to what my actual journey is. And once I became a Scottie Pippen and got leaders, other leaders to be emboldened, be powered, and infuse them and just encourage them to be the leaders they are, I found true success at that point. It was the transition of ending where I thought my career was going, or on that piece of paper I thought my career was going, to what I'm truly destined to do.
And how far into your career was that? How old were you? How many years ago was that?
Yeah, it was in my kind of mid-30s, so right around 35, 36. I sat
And by
down.
then you were a practicing attorney in a law firm or in a corporation?
Yeah, at that point, I was in a company at that point. I transitioned from a law firm. I was a great attorney. I finished near the top of my class, but boy, was it a square peg in a round hole. And it was one of those things where I found out, is it me in the law or is it the law in me? And I jumped law firms and companies. And then I truly found out, oh, Jason, you're an attorney because of what it says on the business card, not because you're good at it. And that was a transition for me was, am I going to keep doing what my resume says I should do, what the script says I should do, what society says I should do, or am I going to lean into what I do really well?
Right. And I love what you said before. You kept jumping law firms and you're trying to figure out if it was you or the law. And these are changes. We talk about the difference between changes and transitions. You changed jobs. You changed even types of industry from a law firm to a company. And yet you're still there because you hadn't done the internal work yet to see that you're supposed to be doing something different.
Art, your words rang true to me this past week when you were saying that, because absolutely, some people change, and sometimes the change is a helpful thing, but if you're not going to do the transition inside and the change inside, the new mahogany desk will not change anything. It'll just be a different mahogany desk. And it wasn't truly until that I realized, wow, I need to lean into what I do well rather than what the business card in front of me says.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I think so many people don't ever get there, right? They keep living in that space. So how did that shift your business that you're doing? Like, so you said you had this picture of you're going to be CEO or president of some big company, and now you realize, actually, I'm going to be better supporting other leaders. How did you manifest that? How did you bring that about into your career?
Two things. First is I categorically stopped doing things because other people perceived that was a loftier status. And I just leaned into what I do really well. And it wasn't about what is that career going to look like? How am I going to make money in that? Just what do I do really well? And what I do really well is truly a culmination of all my past experiences to really find out what makes people tick and how do I connect with them and how do I just really get to their secret power. And that's what changed in my career.
So talk a little bit more about that. When you get to somebody's secret power, what does that mean to you?
There's a lot of people that try to find us and help people find their secret power. And that's wonderful. Now, I try to find their secret power, not so they know what their secret power is, but I know what their secret power is. Now, I want them to know as well. That's important in the journey. But what I really want to know is their secret power. And I'll give you an example. It's kind of a silly example, but you'll get my point. If I know your secret power, Art, is you can physically lift a blue car. If a car is blue, you can physically lift the car. Now, if the car's red, can't do it. If the car's yellow, you can't lift it. And you can't lift the bowling ball. But your superpower is to lift a blue car. Right. Now, I know that. You don't even know that about yourself. Right. And I'm walking, and 2 years later, I see somebody and they're trapped with under a blue car. You know what I can do? I can call you because I know you have that superpower. Now, it's kind of a silly metaphor, but the point is everyone's got a superpower. And if I can know what that is and catalog those and knows what those are, as life comes up, I can call on those people. I know those people are to help in my journey because we're in this together.
Right. So you can help in your journey and then you can have them help other people. Like you said, if someone's stuck under a car,
that's right.
You know the person to call to help somebody else out in that situation as well.
That's right. I believe in the law of reciprocity. People have always asked me, hey, Jason, how do you get your large network of people? How do you do that? And I believe in the law of reciprocity. What do I mean? Art, if you and I went to lunch tomorrow, and bought a couple ham sandwiches, and I paid for lunch. Great. Say a week went by, and we went to lunch. We went to the same spot, and we got the same sandwiches. You might say, "Hey, Jason, you bought lunch last time. Let me get it."
My turn.
So when I try to meet any person, I immediately connect them with 5 really good people. Just immediately connect 5 really good people. Because what am I doing? So when they go, Jason, thanks for connecting with those 5 people. They don't even know why they're doing it sometimes, but they have the law of reciprocity is they'll connect me
Absolutely.
There. So my point in kind of saying that is getting to know the core, what makes people tick and what is their superpower and those kind of things helps me not only just in that relationship, but in others that come through it.
Obviously. And clearly, if you're really curious about somebody, there's nothing that's more attractive to somebody than to someone else be curious about them and really see them and really listen to them.
That's right, Art. I always say is, connection comes from good communication.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, was I blessed with having law school as and being an attorney is part of my background? Was I fortunate to have very inquisitive parents? I absolutely was. So it's been ingrained in me to be inquisitive and ask really good questions. But you can do that too. Listen, connection is a skill that can be learned. It's not a skill you're born with. Connection is a skill you can be learned. You got to find the way to ask really good questions and take the time to ask them and go deep into those people. Now, you can dress it any way you want to, but the ability to ask and communicate effectively is the key to connection.
Absolutely. And the key to connection is the key to getting anything done, the key to leadership, the key to good relationships in your family and your friendships. I mean, all of it, right?
That's correct. And I think what's happened today is there is a lot of communication in our marketplace. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people talking. There's a lot of mediums that have communication, but few connect.
Yeah.
So how is it that there's so much communication and communication is so easy, yet you go back 50 years and more people connected then than now?
Yeah.
Is because communication is only the gateway to connection.
Yeah. And I love that differentiation. I used to say that it's not communication unless it's connection, but I actually like that better and I would define true communication, has three parts, right? You have to send out a signal. The receiver has to send back a signal, and you have to confirm that that's it or not it, right? But that's where you get connection. But right now we have all this noise. I mean, all this social media and everything, there's all this noise, but you don't know if you really have any connection, even on a data level, let alone on a human heart level, which is where you get into real connection.
That's absolutely right. And people have gotten so transactional in their communication that they'll never find out if there's a connection.
Yeah.
Again, it's so transactional in their community, they don't really give the time to see if it's a connection. And you can be sometimes, you can almost, if you need to be, almost self-centered in that way, which is people so many times are communicating what good they can get out of it when they should be communicating what good they can pass along.
Right, or what good they can bring to the situation.
That's exactly right, and that brings true connection.
Yeah, no, and I think there's so many things that come up for me when we talk about this. I mean, I love this quote that says the highest gift that one human being can give to another is the purity of their attention, right? To be really present with somebody else is the highest gift, and that's where you can build connection.
So it's absolutely. I'll tell you a funny story about that. But you're correct in in being 100% present. I have this saying where I'm 100% present 100% of the time.
If you really are, that's amazing. You're the first person I've ever met that is 100% present 100% of the time.
Well, I'll tell you how I learned this is so a couple things. Number one, I used to have an office. This is probably 8 or 9 years ago, where it was very close to my house, very close to my house. And we had little kids at the time.
Right.
And during the day, my wife would bring the little kids over to my office and they'd play around and it would be great. And then I'd go home that evening and I'd be playing with them and I'd check a few emails and things like that. And it dawned on me that when I'm at work, I'm using air quotes, distracted with my kids because they'll come over. And when I'm home, I'm distracted with them with checking work emails. And it dawned on me, I'm doing neither well.
Exactly.
I need to be 100% present 100% of the time. So if you come to my office, I don't have any clocks on the wall. I don't wear a watch ever. I don't take care of time. Now that said, I have 2 assistants that are required to check that calendar and check that watch to keep me on there. And they will give me 10-minute warnings, 5-minute warnings and end the meeting. But for me to be 100% present 100% of the time, I removed anything that would confuse that for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's beautiful to not just recognize it, but to take concrete action to allow yourself to be more present. You can be 100% with that client. And then when you know that your assistant's going to let you know when you need to switch to the next one.
That's absolutely right.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by MidLife Transition Mastery. If you have reached midlife and you are successful, you have checked all the boxes, you've done everything you thought you should do, and especially pleasing everybody else, doing what you think everyone else needs you to do, but you still feel like something's missing, like you're coming up empty, feeling alone, feeling misguided or lost. MidLife Transition Mastery Explorer community is for you. Here we will build authentic community. We will learn about the 8 steps to mastering midlife transition, and we will learn and execute living live with no regrets in our second half. Please check out the community on lifeintransition.online/MLTM, Midlife Transition Mastery. And I look forward to seeing you around the fire in this community.
I'm not suggesting this, but I've even gone one step further, which is, this is maybe 14 years ago, I was driving in my car and the radio was on. And I was driving and 5 minutes went by, took a couple turns, that kind of thing. And it dawned on me, I don't remember making those turns. I've been driving in my own head and I don't remember what.
On autopilot.
We all have done that.
Absolutely.
But it scared me in that moment. I've been listening to something for those 5 minutes. What was I listening to? If I don't remember driving, how in the world do I know what was going on in my head, what they were telling me?
Right.
So again, 100% present 100% of the time. So for 14 straight years, I've never had the radio on in my car.
Right.
So when you get in my car, I am absolutely present,
With
not
driving.
just to drive, but to anything else my head has for me.
Right.
And so I don't confuse things. I don't let things confuse me.
Right.
I want to be 100% present 100% of the time for something that God may give me, that my mind may give me in that quiet moment of driving. So that's just a minor example of being 100% present 100% of the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I think it makes sense. You can't, and you and I talked about this sometime we've seen each other a lot in the last couple of weeks, but that there's no real such thing as multitasking. Like everybody thinks they can multitask, but really you're just doing neither thing well. You're distracted from both.
That's correct. And, I always give this little game for people about multitasking. I have them get a piece of paper and I have them write the number 1, then A, 2, then B, 3, then C, and that towards the alphabet. And I time them. And they do it in whatever time they do it in. Then I say, okay, well, here's what I want you to write 1 through 26, and then jump over and go A, B, C, D all the way down, and then let's time you. And it's invariably the
Much
1 through
faster.
the numbers and the letters by itself always go faster. And that shows the misnomer of numbers, phone call, then text, email, then text. Multitasking will do that. So being 100% present 100% of the time will get things done even that much quicker.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which most people don't realize. So I want to come back to when you made the decision, when you made the realization that you are not your title, you are the gifts that you have, and that you wanted to go after those regardless of title or compensation or anything else. How did you have the courage to do that? You were mid-30s, you had a small family already. I assume you're the primary breadwinner. So what gave you the courage to go after that sort of, I'm going to say what felt like anyway, the middle of your career? It may not have been quite the middle, but you're well into your career. You're doing very well financially. And now you're changing to based on what you feel like your gifts are and nothing else.
I'm glad God gave me that courage. I don't know if I had it as well as you're saying it today, but it dawned on me. It's that square peg and round hole. It's those of you that have a job and it's not, innately, it's not tapping all your resources. If you know that innately, you've got 2 choices. You can keep doing something over and over and over and expect a different result. Insanity. Or you can say, hey, listen, I'm going to pursue and lean into what I do well. And I'll tell you, any person, anytime that's leaned into what they do well, revenue will follow. The business will follow because you're doing what you're positioned on earth to do. Too many times is the lack of confidence, society, social media. A friend will say, oh, that doesn't fit into the box I know.
Right.
That doesn't fit into what I know.
Right.
And I say, that's fine. That's just not going to be my journey.
Right.
My journey is going to be to what I lean into well. Say it a different way is we were at a Bible study recently and we were talking about the difference about surrender. And I think there's an element to that. I choose to look at it differently. I choose to look at being proactive and leaning in. I lean in until God says that's not the direction to go.
And how does God say that? Like, how do you know when God's saying it's not the direction to go?
It'll be very difficult to lean. You'll be very difficult to lean. The wind will push you backwards.
Okay.
But the problem we have is when we lean into something, we're also looking at extra factors and extraneous factors to give us validation. And you know what? None of that will happen because that's somebody else's box. That's not your box.
Right.
Your journey is you leaning in with your secret skill set and your secret talents to whatever that is. Somebody else that doesn't have those secret talents and doesn't have the special skills you do, is then commenting on that, you're never going to get clarity of mind.
Sure.
You're never going to get that. Only you know.
So you talk about, okay, you lean in, which means, and there's some effort, there's some from your side, something scares you or whatever, but you still feel it's your talent. You lean into it. You may have the negative comments from somebody else that's not on their own journey as far as you are, or doesn't understand your journey, either one. But then you also said, okay, but if there's too much resistance, if the wind is blowing you backwards, then it's God saying, hey, that's not the path for you. Where's the line between those two things? If you're getting some resistance from people around you, or if it's more difficult than you thought, how do you know which one is right?
I guess those goes back to people's journey. And I would say this, and this isn't true for everybody, but it'll be more true than most things, which is early in your career, people are so concerned about having a job and financially getting the next best job. Something pays me $5,000 more a year. Something, right. And I always tell people this: the first 10 years of your career, maybe 25 to 35 or whatever that, 20 to 30, you're in the experience collection business. You're in the experience collection business. No different than if you're a NFL quarterback. Those first couple, you need reps. You need to see that. And then what happens is what Tom Brady said: the game slows down. So when you ask me, hey, at 50, how do you know when to lean in? How do you know those things? It's because I have a collection of experiences I can pull from at any given time. So I would say is if you're under 35, if you're early in your career, collect experiences, collect as many conversations, experiences. Not that you need them for today necessarily, but there'll be a point in time you can look to and say, I can pull that experience off. I can pull that life lesson off, which will help you in your decision-making process in that moment.
So when you made the decision in your mid-30s to give up on the traditional career path about, money and title and position and power and so forth, that was accumulation. Because you said at 50, but at 50, you have a lot more wisdom, obviously at 35. But at 35, you had enough wisdom, or mid-30s, whenever it was, 33, that you had enough wisdom to change. So you felt it already then from the different experiences you had to say, I'm going to stop this and start leaning into where my gifts are.
That's correct. And I think that comes from having every person has a secret skill, a superpower, as I call it. And I think the genesis comes from having the confidence that is what your superpower is.
How do you know that?
How do you know that?
You're like, how did you, when you were 33, if you take was it 33?
Yeah,
how old
about
were
33 to 35.
33, 35. When you're in that space, how did you know that?
Things got easy.
Things got easy. You changed.
I changed.
And then it flowed.
I ended being the guy in the center of it all and became number 2 for somebody else. And once I became 2 to somebody else's number 1, became that Batman or the Robin to that Batman or the Scottie Pippen to the Michael, or whatever you want to call it, things got easy for me. It's like, this is easy.
Interesting.
And then the money started to flow. And then revenue started to come in.
Interesting.
I will just say is, if you're in a job that's hard, and there's hard jobs out there, but if you kind of physically and mentally, this exhausts me,
right? That
may be a telltale that is not your calling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things get easy when it's your calling. Things are there. And again, I had a mentor tell me, keep shuffling until you get a full house. I mean, keep shuffling, keep trying things. I mean, folks who there's multiple companies started in their late 40s.
Yeah.
And
50s,
there's no
60s, 70s.
There's no prescription for that. There's no written out journey. But if you're battling with discomfort or stress and there's stress in everything, but you know the difference.
Distress versus eustress, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
You will know to lean into something and then things get easy.
Right.
And then you know, this is my calling.
Okay. Interesting. Now that's really useful. Looking back to that time when you made that change, what is the biggest thing that you have learned? Like, if you went back to tell your 33-year-old or even your 23-year-old when you're starting law school, or 22-year-old, what have you learned in the 20 years since then or 25 years since then that you would tell that younger self? What would you want him to know?
Two things. Communication is critical. We all know that. But the second thing is more important than that, which is this. We've all heard this saying, but it's so true, and I live my life on this. People will forget what I have said. They'll forget what I say in this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
They'll forget what I've done. They won't even look at it, but they'll never forget how I made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
People never forget how you make them feel. Now, that comes through communication, but so many times people are based on, what is the words? What is that transcript?
Right.
Get off the transcript.
Yeah.
People will never forget how you make them feel, and that's through communication. And not through the words again, but it's how you make them feel. And too many times early in my career, I was proving them with works. I was proving them with my eloquent speech. I was doing all those things I was trained to do.
Right. You were impressing people. You were showing them that you knew what you were talking about, that you could manage the situation.
But I never focused on how I made them feel.
Right. Never listening to them, seeing them.
Those things. So I would be laser focused in how you make people feel. Not the words you say, not the acts you do, although important.
Right.
This is not, but I would be very focused on how did I make people feel when they left my office.
Right. Oh, it's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. And that way you can apply just as much to people leaving your office as when you tuck your kids in at night, or you're going out on a date with your wife or your husband.
It's little things. There's probably many folks in sales, and I was in sales too. And you know what? Nobody likes to be sold.
Right.
But they all want their needs met.
That's right.
So, I mean, I still remember my first job out of college was I was a door-to-door salesman, and I loved it. Still to this day, one of my favorite jobs. And I remember after that summer, and this is years later, I would tell my wife about and she said, well, what were the best homes to go to? Like, how did you know if there was some homes that are better to go for door-to-door selling? And I said, I would always look for the homes that I do not solicit. No soliciting. She goes, what? Why would you go to those homes? Because I would say is those people have identified they have a problem, and now we're telling everybody they have a problem because they don't want to be solicited. The people that don't have a problem with it, they just don't care. They don't put no soliciting. But if you have a problem with it, you put no soliciting. And when we go to the door, remember, these people don't want to be sold, but these people need their needs met. So you'd go to the door and they say, are you selling something? Oh, no, I'm not here. I'm just here to kind of educate people on what's going on currently in the school system. Oh, come on in. My point is, once you pivot from selling people to fulfilling their needs, then you've become a professional.
Right. No, that makes sense. This pivot that you made in your career when you realized it's not about the title, it's not about the power, how did that affect the relationships around you in your career, but also in your personal life? What effect was that on the key relationships in your life?
I could be authentic.
Yes.
I could be authentic for the first time.
And what's the impact of that? I mean, it's sort of obvious in a way, but still.
Yeah. People like helping people that they like. I mean, I know it sounds very cliched, but if they like you and you're authentic, it's amazing how many times people will help you in return. If you are the smartest in the room, if you're the wealthiest in the room, but people just you don't make them feel well, they're not going to help you. And so the pivot I had of just saying, hey, it's not about my title. And I don't even have a business card saying, aside from the digital business card aspect, I don't have a business card nor a title. I'm not on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I've never been on any of those platforms. But what I am is intentional about helping people. And I think it's the proverbial thing of, I remember somebody saying when they had a deaf relative, and they said, hey, Jason, do you know when you're deaf, the other senses you have get heightened?
Right.
I said, I think so. And they said, that's you. Because you don't have a crutch of an electronic way of connecting with people, your other senses have gotten heightened. And then that goes back to just being 100% present 100% of the time.
Like really being with people. Yeah. No, and obviously that's, that authenticity is what people are looking for in relationships, and you're going to feel a lot more connected, right? And,
that's right.
Be able to do things for you. It's interesting. I had a huge B2B sales job, and I sometimes $1 billion contracts, and they're very complicated, very big companies with huge purchasing teams combing all the data, and still they only buy from somebody they like, right? In that situation. And people say, that's not true because I have all these metrics. I said, yeah, but here's the thing. If they like me, they'll help me to get to the metrics that they need more than they'll help somebody else, right? And they have trust that also that I'm going to deliver, right? And these are very big, very complex, very long-term contracts, right? They might go for even up to 10 years. And it's still, even in those situations, it comes down to, am I making a decision to work with somebody that I like, that I trust?
There's 3 reasons people buy from somebody: know, like, and trust. Know, like, and trust. Excuse me. Know, like, trust, and product knowledge. Product knowledge. But I always say is, why did you pick the dentist you go to? Did you check his references? Did you check the last 10 root canals? No. You picked him because you know him, you like him, and you trust him. Product knowledge is secondary. So if you're picking the dentist who's going to be inside your mouth based on no product knowledge, that should show you how people buy from people they know and like and trust.
Right. And of course, if you violate that trust because you don't have competency,
that's right,
that'll throw out the trust and it'll change it for sure. Since you had that major transition, the most impactful transition, mid-30s, has it been the final one, or do you think transitions always continue?
I think there'll be seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think there'll be seasons. And I'm only 50, so I can't answer if this is the final transition.
Right.
But I will say this. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing, when I say certain satisfaction, there's an incredible satisfaction in knowing when you're doing on earth what you're positioned to do.
Mm-hmm. What you're meant to do.
What you're meant to do.
Yeah.
When all the barriers are removed and this is what you're supposed to do. Now, there are problems. You make bad decisions. You didn't see things through, and there's all those things along the way. But when you find what you're truly put on earth to do, you know certain transitions may not happen. There'll be other transitions, but that may be, that worry will alleviate yourself. So I can't answer it's the last transition, Art, but I do know I'm on earth in this season positioned to do exactly what I should be doing.
And if you can replicate that, if there's something else you're meant to do later, following the same process will take you to that as well.
That's right. And I think there's a constant lean in perspective as well.
Yeah.
Again, I was gifted in the ability to ask really go through law school, but I was also gifted growing up in the household I was of always questioning things. Mm-hmm. And we don't question things and then go to some sort of confirmation bias as a source of that answer.
Right.
Question and then truly look to the why behind something. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if there'll never be another transition, but I will constantly be refining myself to be asking those questions. Is this the right path? Constantly.
Right. And then that'll help you to stay on the right one or change to the next right one, whichever it is.
That's exactly right.
So where do you think your life would be if you had stayed on the title, money path and hadn't listened to what it is that you're gifted to do? Where do you think your life would be now if you hadn't made that transition in your mid-30s?
I'll make a parallel that people may not like. Today, there's a lot of people in homes with a 3% mortgage, mm-hmm. and they cannot move. Mm-hmm. That's where I would have been. Mm-hmm. Not at maybe the home and the mortgage, but I would be in a position that I was making too much money.
Golden handcuffs. And
I could not change.
Yeah.
And I am, I'm never going to be put in that position. I do not want to be put in that position, I should say. I'd be that. And now, if I was that, I would hope somebody like me, a mentor, would come into my life and say, it's not too late.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Yeah.
You can always make that transition.
Right.
You can always end that and run to something.
Yeah. Which is true. And it's our stories that we tell ourselves that keep us stuck. I remember when the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, everything's melting down. And how many people, I was living in Detroit at the time, and how many people would tell me, oh, I'd love to move, but I can't because everything's melting down. And during that time, I sold my house in Detroit for a huge loss and rented down here. Why? Because I chose to do so. I wasn't going to be bound by, I'm going to have a huge loss in my home, so I can't. And it's funny that I've rented for a little while at the bottom here, bought a farm down on 840, mm-hmm. which I sold in 2022 for $1.5 million profit.
Yeah.
Much more than I lost on my house in Michigan at the time. But I wasn't willing to be a victim to the Great Recession and say, well, I'm going to be stuck. No, it's going to take some lumps and I'm going to lose a lot of money here, but it's still not what I'm meant to do. So like you said, we always have the choices, but we often have a very hard time seeing it. And it's like you said, we need somebody else to help us see it. My wife helped me see that time, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious on that point, who are you helping through transitions right now? Who's coming to you for you to be that mentor to help show them that they can make this type of transition?
There's several. And I share with everyone doing that this story. It's about the two little boys, the two 8-year-old twin boys. One was always happy, one was always sad. One was always happy, one was always sad. And the dad said, let me take them to the doctor. They're twin boys, same home. One is always happy, one is always sad. There's got to be a test for this. The doctor takes the doctor out and says, we do have a test for this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the little boy who's always sad, and we're going to put him in a room filled with candy, toys, and games. Okay? And we're going to take the other little boy down the hallway and put him in a room filled with just manure. The little boy is always happy. He's in a room filled with manure, just horse manure. And we're going to wait 1 hour. We'll see what happens. So they waited an hour. And then the doctor said to the dad, let's go see what the boys are doing. They first walked into the door of the little boy that was always sad. And they opened the door, and they saw him in the corner, just kind of hunched down after an hour. And they said, little boy, you didn't play with any of the games. He said, well, I couldn't figure them out. Well, why didn't you eat any of the candy? Oh, I thought I might get a tummy ache. Why didn't you play with the toys? I might break them. Well, that's sad. And they said again, okay, well, we'll come back to you just 1 second. Then they walked down the hall to the little boy that's always happy. They opened the door, and as soon as they opened the door, manure was everywhere. It was on the walls, on the ceiling, the window, and everywhere. And he was kind of head first in the middle of it. And they said, little boy, what in the world are you doing here? And the little boy said, sir, with all this manure, there has to be a pony somewhere.
Right.
And that's a shout out to Mordot Lee, who initially told the story.
Right.
But and so when people going through transition, like, what is your mind like? What is your mind? Is your mind ready? Is your mind ready? Because there will be manure.
Yeah, for sure.
There will be a lot of it. And you're going to look for those ponies. Again, when you lean into something, this is not a lean of saying everything is toys, games, and candy. This is a lean because you know your skill set, and you know the direction for where you should be going based on your superpower. And we're looking for those ponies. So yes, I'm helping people constantly look for those ponies in their next transition.
This episode of the Life in Transition podcast is brought to you by Transition Mastery Coaching. If you have made it to midlife and you're successful and you are going through transitions in your life, in your business, in your career, or in your organization, and you are looking to master those transitions, to make the most of them, to accelerate into the next phase of your organization or your life. If you're facing challenges in your business, challenges in your relationship, challenges in your health, and you really want to transition those quickly, I'm here to guide you for that. And I look forward to working with you. And you can sign up for either Pinnacle Transition Coaching or Summit. Please go to lifeintransition.online/MLTM and scroll to see the Summit and Pinnacle Coaching, or reach out to me directly on my email, art@artblanchford.com. And I look forward to connecting with you and helping you to accelerate your transitions to achieve what it is that you want to achieve in the second half in your organization and in your life, so you can live your whole life with no regrets. There's so many people that tell themselves a different story and don't realize that they have the voice, that they have the agency, that they have the empowerment to dig in the manure, even if it's manure, and find what's good and appreciate that and build on that based on what their superpower is.
That's exactly right. I mean, I think in our youth are so skillful in these transitions. And I think the first step, almost the AA step, is acknowledging you are going to go through a transition.
Mm-hmm.
Is you need to acknowledge that first. Don't let the transition happen to you. You do the transition.
Right.
Too many times the transition's happening, it's almost this, again, I call it the surrender feel, which again has an altruistic aspect to it, but it's a mindset.
Right.
Are you going to lean into it?
Right.
And is your mind ready for this?
Yeah. Are you going to resist it, or are you going to accept it? I mean, I have this workbook that we go through. It's called the 8 Steps to Mastering Midlife Transition. And the first one is acceptance. This is where I am. Or you might take Jim Collins, like, face the brutal facts. Like, where are we really? Instead of denying it. Like, what is it? Where is it? And what's going on? And if we don't, like, you chose to make a transition very proactively. But if you hadn't, you would either still have the golden handcuffs, or you would be so disgruntled doing something you weren't supposed to be doing, somebody else make a transition for you. They would help you by kicking you out of that job and breaking those golden handcuffs, right? Which at the time might seem really bad, but as you said a minute ago, well, you turn the page and you figure out why on the next page, right? So the transitions are coming. Do you want to be proactive and work through it and help others? Or do you want to be the victim to the transition? In which case, still, the first step is acceptance.
That's exactly right, Art. And I guess I would rephrase my previous transition question you had for me. I took that in the context of maybe employment, but is seasons, transitions, the question for people is, are you going through one right now? And if not, you're between them.
Right. Yeah.
So if you know you're between them and you know they are coming, the fool is you for not knowing when it happens.
Right. And to not be ready for it, to not be prepared,
ready.
Right?
Intentionality, presence, not just on the ending of something, but on the beginning of something. Both need equal passion and ferocity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And to be ready. I mean, if you're going to go, you and I are both, endurance athletes. And if you're going to go run a big race, you're not going to show up at the starting line without having done the preparation. Right. I mean, one of my avatars is Iron Man. When I think about standing at the starting line of an Iron Man, calm, confident, prepared, knowing I was about to jump in the water with 10,000 jellyfish, like literally. Right. But still, like I was swimming in that water yesterday with the jellyfish. They sting, it hurts, but it doesn't hurt me. And the guy next to me saying, hey, every time you get stung, instead of bitching, say a prayer for somebody you love. And I thought, dude, these are my people. Right. And I did that. And what a great thing. I mean, yeah, I'm getting stung. I got out. My whole face was like a one welt, right? Because I get hit so many jellyfish. But every time, instead of I would just be like, oh, God bless my daughter, bless my wife. And it changed the whole thing. And my swim was perfectly fine, perfectly calm, threw on a bunch of Benadryl or whatever they had in the bucket at T1 and then kept going and didn't think about it anymore after that, right? So being prepared for that is part of our responsibility, and to enjoy that preparation instead of to complain about it.
That's right. That's right.
So no, that's really beautiful. If you could give one tool to our listeners. So our listeners are, their life is in transition, they're thinking about it, or they're, wishing they had made the transition, or the transition's just caught up with them. What's one thing that you would give that anybody can do right now? They can hit the pause button on this podcast and put in place that can start them on that path. What's the one tool you would recommend to have somebody that's going through transition?
Think big. Think big. I'll share another story that I just resonated me with for 30 years. This story's gone through my head. It's a short story, but it's this, and they'll date this, when I say what the old man did. The old man took the bus to work every day. And one day the old man and he was a sales guy, went to the bus stop and he saw across the way a little boy. And the little boy was standing there with a table and a shaggy, dirty dog next to him. Mm-hmm. And the sign on the table said, "Dog for sale, 25 cents. So the old man said, oh gosh, am I going to be late to work? Let me go talk to this poor kid selling the dog for 25 cents. Right. So he walked over there and said, young man, I'm going to be late to work, just to kind of give you a couple pieces of advice. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to get this dog, you're going to cut its hair, you're going to clean it, shampoo it, make it look great. Okay? And then lastly, nobody wants to buy a dog for 25 cents. Think big. Just think big. So the next day at work, man got to the bus stop, looked across the way. Little boy was there. Dog looked great. Clean, freshly cut, the whole thing. And there was a sign that said, dog for sale, $10,000. So the man goes, oh my gosh, what have I done here? So walked across there and said, young man, dog looks great, cut its hair, you did a great thing, but nobody wants to buy a dog for $10,000. He said, sir, you told me to think big, and it's the biggest number I could think of. I'm thinking big. And the old man thought to himself, I better stop my advice here. Good, best of luck. So the next day, the old man got to the bus stop and there was the table across the way, but no little boy, no dog. And that sign that said dog for sale, $10,000 had big red letters across it, sold. So the old man goes, I'm going to be late 3 days to work. I got to find out what's going on here. Nobody buys a dog for $10,000. So he went around and finally found the home where the little boy lived. And the mom answered the door, and finally the little boy got there. He said, young man, you did great. Who'd you sell the dog to? He goes, I sold it just like you told me to, sir. He goes, you did not sell it for $10,000. Tell me. Goes, yes, I did. Who bought it for $10,000? And the little boy said, well, the little girl across the street had two $5,000 cats, and we did it. And What I love about the story is, yes, it's a funny story and all that, but too many times we don't think big. We have limiting thoughts. We don't think big. So if you're going through a transition, you know that we all go through it. Think big. Don't put a ceiling on it. Think big. Don't put a lampshade on anything. Think big.
No, I love that. Thank you. So we hear our dogs barking. I don't know what they're thinking big about upstairs, but
they're being sold for $10,000 is what they think it is.
I got 30,000 coming in then. That's all right. Nice half hour of work. No, that's really good, and I am really reflecting on that. I think is a good, I remember somebody, I don't remember who it was, and you probably know this author as well, but saying whatever you have in mind from your reach, whether it's dollars or people or whatever, add a 0 or 2.
Do it. As you're going through the transition, think big.
Yeah.
Just put a think big.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. Where can our listeners find out more about you? You said in the beginning, you're the founder of these Symphony companies. Where, if they want to reach out to you, I know you said you're not on social media, but where can they connect with you?
Yeah. No, we, because I want to connect in person.
Right.
When you asked me to do this podcast, I'm doing it in person,
which is great. Yeah. Appreciate you coming across town and doing it in person.
Of course. On a Friday, traffic.
Exactly. We didn't used to have traffic like that here in Nashville, but now we do.
No, I'm very accessible through our Symphony Advice or Symphony 6 websites. I can be reached that way too. I love having meetings with folks. I love knowing exactly where you're at and how to position, because we're fortunate enough to have nearly 2,000 clients come through our door, and people have sat in the chair across from me having these exact conversations.
Right.
Conversation about transitions. Exact.
Right.
And so if you're somebody out there and you're thinking a transition might be happening or could be happening, reach out to me. I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you and kind of walk you through that a little bit.
Awesome. Thank you. And I want to reflect on one final thing. You said that you really are about being the Scottie Pippen to somebody else's Michael Jordan. And I see that from your client perspective. But when I look at you and your business, you have a pretty good sized business now, and you are the boss of that business. So do you have both, or how does that feel to you? Because in your business, you are clearly the number one guy.
I don't know about a lot of you, but I still see myself as 22 years old. I go, and I almost feel like I look like I have more hair than I actually do. I keep thinking that because I keep thinking I'm 22 years old. So Art, that has been the biggest transition for me, which is, we have a large company and I am that person now. But I guess part of it, I don't see myself as that way. And every day I still wake up to make somebody else be their Michael Jordan.
Right.
I wake up every day doing that. And we built infrastructure for me to not have to be that in every sense.
Right.
But I stay true to what I'm really good at.
Yeah. And this is why I asked this question, because I think it's really important that, in a sense, right now you have your cake and you get to eat it, but it's because you recognize your superpower, because you recognize God's calling for your life and follow that without really, being attached to the outcome. Like to say, this is what I'm really good at, I'm going to follow that. And then along the way, 20 years later, 15 years later, you also are running a good sized business as well.
It's funny how that works out sometimes. It dawned on me as well, for those listening, is really get to know your superpower. And sometimes that's you think about it, but sometimes that's asking clients, friends, what do I do well? What do you see in me? What do you do that? And then whatever that is, whether it's communication or the ability to speak or ability to write or ability to analyze, whatever that is, and then again, lean into it. And then you're going to see opportunities come up. But find that out first. That would be, to kind of circle back to a question you had for me early on, what would I have told my 30-year-old self? Find your superpower out early.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And I think with that, we'll wrap it up. I think that's a great advice for anybody. It doesn't matter if you're 18 or 80, you still have a chance to do that and to really live a much more meaningful, richer life, which is the whole purpose of this podcast. So Jason, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time coming over here on a Friday afternoon, and I appreciate your energy and your passion for living your superpower and recognizing that. And I'm really excited and congratulate you on living that life that has come because you followed your superpower.
Thanks, Art. It's been great being here. Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you, bud.
I can't wait to hear what action you are taking. Connect with me on LinkedIn or our website, lifeintransition.online, and let me know. Let a friend know too. It could be a huge encouragement to them and keep you on the track. Thank you so much for joining me today. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it would mean a lot to me if you left a review and shared this episode with a friend. If you want to learn more about me and what I do when I'm not podcasting, please visit me at artblanchford.com. Thank you for listening. Together, let's make the most of life in transition.